is currently the manager of worldwide digital sales and distribution at Lionsgate. He has 3+ years of experience in software and startup space and 3 years experience in retail management for operations, recruitment, and human resources. He worked as a graduate assistant and ambassador at Chapman University and was also a special projects consultant for the Board of Counselors. Ash graduated with his Bachelor's of Science from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and holds an MBA from Chapman University. He also currently serves on the Chapman MBA Alumni Board. Ash enjoys watching movies, swimming, running half marathons, and traveling around the world. So with that, I will pass things over to Ash, who can talk more about his unique career journey to the entertainment industry.
Thanks, Shannon. Thank you all for joining today. It's great to have everybody here. I've never done a webinar like this, so it's exciting for me to be able to talk to you all. Hopefully you find this time valuable, and feel free to ask any questions. As Shannon mentioned, I'll be happy to answer as many as I can, either as I'm going through or at the end. So what do I do? I am a manager of worldwide digital distribution and sales, which is just a fancy title for I sell movies. And I sell movies in the window that comes right after theatricals. So typically how movies get released are a studio will greenlight it and it will go into theaters for a limited run. And then after theaters, it comes to what is known as transactional home entertainment. And that's where me and my team come in. And we sell movies for rent or buy. So everything except streaming, which is a separate window. Then we sell our movies to digital platforms like iTunes, Amazon, the cable platforms, Comcast, Charter, Cox, all of them. And we work to get placement for our titles. And that's kind of like what we do. It's a mix of data analytics, marketing, trying to figure out what movies do well during certain time frames, whether it's an actor or a genre, or if it's a franchise, how can we best release it? So there are a lot of release strategy tactics that go into it. But how I got here into this role is very unique, and that's kind of what I wanted to share with everybody today. And hopefully you guys can, I'm sure there's going to be people that are listening that can relate to some of this stuff, and maybe you don't, but the kind of the overarching theme of what I wanted to touch on today is taking risks and being adaptable. I definitely would not be in the position that I'm in today if I did not take any risks and if I was not adaptable. So, I grew up in Southern California, and I'm a first-generation Iranian American. Both my parents wanted me to be, it's the typical Persian thing is to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. So I chose doctor, and I went to UC Santa Barbara pre-med. And as I was going through my time there, after like year 2, I was like, I don't really want to be a doctor. What can I do? And I was trying to discover myself, a young, adolescent at that time. So I went to my advisor and I said, what can I do? Is there a way for me to switch my major to business? And she said, no, not if you want to graduate in 4 years. You've basically done way too many bio and science classes. So you can graduate pre-med, bio, and then try and find some internship opportunities on campus where you can get involved in business and try and go from there. So not ideal. So I graduated pre-med. I did finish that path, but knowing that I didn't want to be a doctor, so figuring out what I wanted to do, I got involved in some campus organizations that let me kind of work on my business skills, networking skills, which were very helpful. When I graduated, it was a really tough time for the economy and jobs. It was the year after the stock market crash, the housing crisis, and it was the second worst year in like U.S. unemployment history. So it was not a good time to be looking for a job. And I had to kind of just, try something that I didn't think I wanted to do necessarily, but something that was going to help, pay the bills. So I got into investment banking. I did that for a year. I hated it. The money was good, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't something that I enjoyed doing. It's not, something that I believe in is a good form of business practice. So after about a year of that, I started looking around, trying to find another opportunity, and an opportunity opened up at Sam's Club to be an operations manager for them in San Diego in one of their retail stores. So I took that job. I moved to San Diego. I lived there for 3 years. It is a tough job. If any of you ever worked in service industry or retail, you know how hard and grueling those hours can be. I was working 70, 80 hours a week. Sometimes I'd go, 2, 3 weeks without a proper day off. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about operations. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about myself. And, after a certain period of time, I was like, okay, I feel like I've reached, the point that I can reach with this position. What are my options? What can I do? As much as I loved what I did with the people that I worked there and how much I was learning, I still didn't feel that passion and drive for something that I wanted to turn into like a lifelong career. So I started exploring MBA programs and seeing, maybe there's a chance that I can go and take the GMAT and go to school again and discover what I want to do at one of these business schools. So I studied for the GMAT, took the classes, and did all of that. Got into Chapman, and it's like, great, I'm going to go to Chapman, and hopefully I can figure out what I want to do from there. So when I went to Chapman, I kind of set these goals for myself of I'm going to go to every single networking opportunity that is presented to me. I don't care if it's related to accounting and finance, and I have no interest in that. I'm going to go to every single one. I'm going to shake hands with people. I'm going to collect business cards. I'm going to put myself out there. And for anyone who's been to networking events, I'm sure a lot of you have, being business students, it's kind of an awkward thing, right? You're going around and you're trying to tiptoe around and find, polite ways of asking people for follow-up contact information. And you're not really sure how to approach. If you find somebody at that point, like, how often do I message them? Is it appropriate to call? Is it okay to ask for a referral or to be mentored by somebody? And I just kind of got to the mindset where I was like, you know what, I'm not going to get anywhere if I don't risk, if I don't, take this chance. So I would just take the business cards, and when I would grab it from them, I would say, hey, is it okay if I follow up with you? Do you prefer email or phone call? And I always made sure to ask that, just so you're respectful of people's, personal time. And it was, it worked wonders for me. I met a lot of people that I'm still in contact with today. And more importantly, I met somebody that served as a mentor for me for a year. And he is the COO of home entertainment at Lionsgate. There was an internship opportunity that popped up while I was in school. So I went and I interned for him and his team for 2 semesters. And it was eye-opening. So it was great that I got to do operations, which is a lot of what my background was, but also movie industry, which I never really put 2 and 2 together. I love film so much. I grew up watching movies. I'm somebody that watches a movie, 5, 6 times. I go to the theaters, a couple times a week. And I always associated the movie industry with talent, acting, directors, producers, writers. Obviously, there's a whole business side to this, and that was my aha kind of moment when I realized that this could be something that I turn into a lifelong career. And I was like, great, I know what I want to do now, operations, movie industry, this is great. I'm finally discovering what I'm trying to do with my life. And I graduated, and I started networking with people at Lionsgate. My mentor was saying, hey, there's this position on the digital sales team that I think you would be great at. I know your heart is very set in operations, but I've seen you talk about film. I've seen you talk to people about movies. I've seen your passion that comes out when you start talking about film. I think this would be a great fit for you if you're open to it. So that's kind of where I stopped, and I was like, you know what? I trusted myself when I started the process of looking for what I wanted to do at Chapman, that I need to, take risks and say yes and be adaptable. And I wasn't going to steer away from that at that point. So I told him, yeah, obviously it's not what I wanted to do, but I'm open to, interviewing for that position. So I interviewed for the position and I got the job. Actually, it's a funny story. During the final interview with my now current boss, he asked me, so how comfortable are you, having a beer and talking somebody about movies? And I was like, is that this job? Like, are you really going to pay me money to have beer and talk to people about film? Which was funny because it's not like a main part of my job, but we do have to, that is a part of it for sure when we do travel and we go see the accounts. So I kind of had a feeling when he said that this would be a good fit, and it has been. And Not to say I'll never go back in operations, but I just feel like it's not, sales for me is much more what I want to do. But the whole, premise of this conversation I'm having with you all is I'm always going to be willing to take risks and say yes and be adaptable and try new things, because it led me to where I am today. And I'm very happy with this career that I have. And I've been with Lionsgate in this role for almost 2.5 years. And it's been fantastic. The connections that I made and the team that I work on and the company culture overall, it's fantastic. We do a lot of things that I love, and I'm looking forward to kind of growing this business in this role and continue to grow in this role as well. So, with that said, it's been an interesting time here. I've like I said, now I'm much more involved in, outside of the sales. How can I become more involved? So, now my boss is letting me work a lot on the green lighting process, reviewing films, watching movies before they're acquired, thinking about, is this a movie that's worth acquiring? What are the analytics that go into that? Does it make financial sense for us to acquire this film? If so, why or why not? So that's kind of a new project that I've been working on the last 6 months, which is great. And other than that, I basically get to talk to people about movies and put together pitch decks and travel to New York, Philly, Seattle, Denver, and talk to our digital retailers and cable retailers about the slate that we have coming up and why we think our movies should have top-of-line placement when they're released. So that's kind of what I do. That's the path that I got here. I'm open to any questions if you guys have them.
Thank you so much, Ash. I was already writing down a few questions as you were going, so that's great. Everybody who's watching, please feel free to pop in the questions in the Q&A section at any point, and Ash will make sure to get to that. But first, I actually want to pick up off of a couple of things that you had said, and I'll start from the last thing that you had said. You had talked about now you get to kind of help a little bit more with the acquiring of maybe new movies or new videos and what, whether you all should take them or not. So can you talk a little more about that process? Like, what's involved in the analytics or decision making behind whether you all pick up a movie or not?
Yeah, this is a good question because it really varies by how far along the film is in production. Sometimes we'll get films that are already done, they're made, and we will get a chance to watch it in our screening room downstairs, and we'll look at what the acquisition cost is, if there's an MG or minimum guarantee tied to it, and then how much of the back end we would get when we distribute the film when it hits our window, and then how much the film is going to make if we can sell it to a streaming platform like Amazon Prime or Netflix or Hulu or anything like that. So we take all of those factors of how those numbers look into consideration, and then we compare it to other films. So we do a lot of comps. We compare it to like actors, either the same actor, similar type of film, similar type of genre, similar release strategies. And based off of all of the numbers of how much we're going to project on the back end, how much we think we're going to make from a streaming deal, and all of that, and all those other factors I just mentioned, we'll sit together as a team and say, hey, yes for this one, no for this one. That's if the movie's done. Sometimes we will just get like a log line and some actors and a director maybe attached to it, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And that one's definitely outside my pay grade because there's a lot of risk involved in greenlighting those films where you have no finished product to view. And that's typically where my boss and the president of home entertainment will step in, and they will review that stuff together. And they got to make, very risky decisions. If it fails, then, the company could be out several millions of dollars. But if it's successful, then, we could have the next big hit. So it really depends on the release strategy, but it's a lot of looking at, how it's compared to other films and what we project based off of that.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like we're getting some Q&A, so we'll get to that in a second. But I did have another one follow up to what you had talked about. You talked about sales and how you hadn't really went into this work to do sales, and that you love it. I think that there for students especially are a lot of myths about sales jobs. So I'm wondering if you could think a little bit about a few myths that you might want to dispel around careers in sales.
It's myths. Yeah, that's a good question too. So on the current role that I'm in right now, it's a lot of account management. So I don't have to do cold calling sales, which is really nice. But when I was in the investment banking role, it was basically all cold calling. And some of the myths, Um, that's tough. I would say that don't be discouraged when you're in a sales role if you're not having early success, because I think that especially in like a cold calling role, I think I had to make like 1,000, I'm not even exaggerating, 1,000 phone calls before I found like something that ended up turning into a deal. And sometimes, you know, you'll have a lot of success with getting early conversations with people, but the deals fall apart for other, you know, other factors. So, you know, I think the biggest thing I would say is to not be discouraged. It's easy to be discouraged in a sales role, and you just got to kind of go to the next one. But and it depends a lot on the industry too. So if investment banking was long hours, you know, 5 a.m., if not earlier, until, you know, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night sometimes. So, you know, depending on the industry, that could be a factor as well, as like how much time are you going to spend on making these deals trying to happen and come to fruition. So for me, it's a lot easier because, you know, I get to sell movies, and people are always trying to find new content, especially with how many different streaming platforms there are today, how many different options you have for watching content. So it's a lot easier for me to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm from Lionsgate, and this is what we're selling.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So it sounds like resilience is really important in sales.
Yeah.
And that it really, I mean, even if it was kind of a grind, it was really helpful experience to get you where you are today and really helped you build skills. So
yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay. I will let you now get to some Q&A. There, it looks like there's some questions in the Q&A box there, so I'll let you take that over.
Yeah. Can you elaborate more on the company culture at Lionsgate? So typically what's great about, you know, working in the movie industry is you get to, you know, be involved with talent and film and things like that, which is cool. But, you know, what sets Lionsgate apart from other studios is, one, we're in West LA. A lot of the other studios are either in Mid-City or the Valley. And so we're in Santa Monica. We're about 2 miles from the beach. Our offices are awesome for that reason. We get to live and work on what I consider to be the best part of LA. And it's a very entrepreneurial environment. And what I mean by that is somebody who has my title that works at another studio, their job is only to sell movies on a monthly basis. Somebody in theatrical will say, these are your, you know, 3 or 4 films that are coming out in home entertainment in April. We sell them 3 months out. And that person's job is only to get sales for those 3 films. For me at Lionsgate, I get to be involved in a lot more. I get to look at deals and see how the deals are structured and why we have certain back-end splits on titles and what works and what doesn't. I get to work with the green light process. If I have an idea for the marketing or the PR team, I can walk over and talk to that team. I have a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities at Lionsgate, which for me is great because I'm always trying to find the next chance to not be bored and try something new and test something out. And having a very diverse, you know, work background experience is great for someone like me because I can kind of draw on some of the different things that I've done in different work industries and try and apply them for this current industry that I'm in right now. So I would say the company culture is great for that reason, and a lot of other people don't see that at other studios. Let's see. What do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were a college student? I wish I had known what I wanted to do because I feel like I'd be, you know, 5, 6 years ahead of where I am right now. But I also wish that I had known back then that it's okay to not know what you want to do. And it's okay to try something and be like, that wasn't for me, and move on to the next thing. And I always felt pressure from, you know, and not directly, but indirectly, because having come from a family that's very successful at what they do, to be successful right away. And it's just not the case for everybody. You know, I have 1 or 2 friends that growing up, they knew exactly what they wanted to do and when they were going to do it and how they were going to get there. But for everyone else, they didn't know, and that's okay. It's okay to not know. And did I lose you guys, Shannon?
Nope, you're still there.
Oh, sorry. Everything's about to restart on me, I think. It's like my thing is crashing.
Oh no, gotta love tech issues. Well, you're still fine right now.
Okay. So it's giving me the little wheel of death, but as long as you can still hear me. So that's I would say is the biggest thing is like it's okay to not know. It's okay for plans to change. Like I said from the beginning, take risks and be adaptable, and just know that you may have plans in your life that you think are going to be perfect and they're cookie cutter, and life might have plans for you. So just kind of follow that path and just trust yourself and make good decisions, and you'll hopefully end up where you need to be. Let's see. Do you have recommendations for someone who is considering pivoting their professional career? Yeah, I would say, like I said in my story of networking events, I can't tell you how helpful those are. At the very worst, you're going to go somewhere and it's boring and you don't meet anyone interesting and you don't get any good leads. But you still normally there's like food and wine or beer at these events, so like you still kind of got that. Um, but at the best, you're going to meet somebody that could change your life. That they're going to make you, they're going to make you a mentee, and you'll be able to stay in contact with them. Um, the hardest thing in pivoting a career is not having a network. So finding networking opportunities where you can meet people is super important, and following up with them. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and talked at Chapman, and people they come up to me afterwards like, yeah, would you mind being a mentor for me? And I'd love to learn more about you and pick your brain and all of that. And I'm always open. I'm an open book for people, and I try and give these opportunities to people because I wouldn't be where I am if somebody didn't do that for me. But I say like maybe 1 out of like 15 people actually follow up on a consistent basis. They check in with me. They ask me questions regularly. And that's how you build a network, and that's how you pivot in an industry. Am I still good, Shannon? Can you still hear me?
Yes, you're still good.
All right. Let's see.
Oh, okay. As I say that, looks like we lost you.
You lost me?
I can hear your voice. I just can't see your video.
Okay.
Just keep going.
Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Just if we can hear you.
All right. What has been the most interesting project you have worked on? John Wick 3. I'm a huge John Wick fan. If you haven't seen the movies, I highly recommend them if you like action films. It was so fun to get to work on a project that this movie was acquired by us, the first one, when nobody wanted to touch it. And the first one was it was a modest hit in theaters, but we really grew it on our side of the business when it hit home entertainment. And it was so great to grow a film from a nothing into something massive just by getting fans in the home entertainment window. And we knew when John Wick 3 was coming out that this movie's going to be a hit. It's going to do awesome in theaters, and we're going to do crazy conversion numbers when it hits our window. And it was so great to like work on a film that everybody in the building was constantly excited for 2 years, building up to like when they greenlit it to when we released it. It was such an awesome time being at Lionsgate, and it's still one of my favorite memories. Let's see. How do international countries affect distribution tactics? Do markets such as China and India affect viability of production? Yeah, this is a great question. So my team actually recently took on international for transactional, and it's very complicated. So right now we're going through all the deals. It's tough to say the least. There's a lot of different things you need to take into consideration. What's the culture like in these countries you're trying to penetrate, and how do you have to take that into consideration for your release strategies there? How are the tax laws there? How are we being reimbursed? How much do we audit them? So it's a very tricky thing to maneuver, and there's a whole group of people that are from president on down trying to figure out how we can best grow transactional right now in those territories. But it's very hard, and it's definitely a challenge that was thrown on our plate late last year, and we're trying to figure it out still. So you absolutely have to take many things into consideration that you don't have to, or that you're used to or accustomed to having distributed in the States. How do analytics play into company decision making? Analytics is a huge part of my job. So when we are talking about releasing a film, we say, this is when we want to release it. Why do we want to release it then? Okay, so we look at our competitive slate. We see what movies are Disney, Warner Brothers, Paramount. What are they releasing during that same time frame? Do we have anything that's going to compete with our film? Why do we think it's going to compete? Is it because it's a genre film? Is it because it's a same actor film? So that's just like from a slate release strategy time point of view, but there's also other factors that we have to consider, like as I mentioned earlier, how much money are we going to make on this film? Why do we think we're going to make that kind of money on it? Different grantors that we distribute different films for have different back-end splits. So how do we prioritize those titles when we have to sell our movies 3 months out to the retailers? So there's a lot of analytics. And then after all of that, we look at the analysis of that. Okay, what worked, what didn't? And then we keep a running record of what's working, what's not, and why. And then that way, when we get to the next batch of films, we have, a consistent log of movies of what's working and what's not. So we're constantly reinforming ourselves of the decisions that we need to make. And I think that's all the questions. Shannon, am I still on?
You're still here. It looks like there is one more, and it was, what was it like being an investment banker?
Oh God, it wasn't for me. As I said, I didn't enjoy finding companies that we could, acquire and kind of strip them for parts and make a quick profit off of it. It's not really a job for me, but I have friends that do it and they love it. The money's really good, but I will say it's very, very tough hours. I mean, the hours that I worked in retail operations management were really hard, but this was a different kind of hard. Because you could be working on businesses on the East Coast. So being based on the West Coast, it's like you got to be on call and ready to go. Sometimes at like 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning was regular, and it's just hard. It's grueling hours, but if you really put your time into it and you find some good businesses, then you can make a lot of money fast. But like I said, it's not really something that was for me.
Great. It looks like we have a few more. I don't know if you can see the ones come in, and so I'll just read them out to you. What has been the biggest challenge you have faced at Lionsgate?
That's a good question. I haven't really stopped to think about biggest challenge. Probably these international territories. So prior to August of last year, we were strictly domestic transactional. So it was US and Canada. And then now we're in charge, my team is in charge of Latin America and New Zealand as well, and then parts of Europe. So it's a huge challenge for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier. I mean, every day we discover a new challenge with these territories, and as we start digging through the deals and we start getting audits back from our auditing team of where our underpayments are or where our overpayments are. In Brazil in particular, we're running into a lot of issues with some of the tax laws that they have there and why we're not being compensated for our titles properly. And sometimes, payments take forever because of the government regulations that are in some of these countries. So it's a huge undertaking. I mean, my guess is we're probably going to have to hire a few more people just to help handle some of this additional workload, because it's as little revenue as they're bringing in compared to what's happening in the United States. It's a ton of work. So I think righting the ship and kind of clearing it out and level setting in these territories is probably going to take at least another 18 months, if not longer.
Awesome. And then I had another one. Is your relationship with other studios strictly competition?
No, it's not. I just had dinner with somebody, my counterpart, person who does the same job as me for Warner Brothers. I chat regularly with the counterpart over at Paramount. I also have coffee usually about once or twice a year with the rep from Sony. So it's definitely not competition. We're all kind of in this together. Like we understand where everybody stands as far as studio rankings and things like that. But we do kind of lean on each other because, without giving away proprietary information or confidential information about the company, it's sometimes, we'll be seeing something with retailer X, and I want to run it by, the other studios and say, hey, are you guys seeing this too? Are they acting this way? Are they saying this? Why? And try and figure out where their heads are at, because at the end of the day, the studios are kind of in this together. It's the retailers that if they want to make a change, it's going to impact our business in a big way, more so than what we see coming from other studios.
Great. So I have kind of another follow-up based on what you had talked about earlier, and you had mentioned that you started school, pre-med, family pressure. I think that's probably a story a lot of students can relate to. So might you be able to share kind of how you navigated that family pressure challenge in your career and any tips that you might give students for that?
Yeah, I would say being open and honest with your family, especially if they're providing financial support, which mine were for my undergrad, was the most important thing. I didn't wait until I graduated to tell my parents, hey, P.S., I'm not going to go to medical school. That would not have gone over well with them. So I told them right when I knew, like, hey, like it was year two, this is not what I want to do. Here's why. And as much as it upset them, they were like very supportive in the sense of, let's figure out a plan. What did your advisor say? What can we do to help? Every family is different, so that approach might not work for everybody, but I would always say err on the side of being open and honest with family. At the end of the day, they're going to be the ones supporting you the most when you need it. You're going to leave college, you're going to lose friends, you're going to lose advisors, but family's always going to be there. And hopefully you can show them through your successes in life that you made the right decision for yourself. And really, for me personally, and this is more about like, as an individual more so than letting family impact you, is quality of life is super important. I know that people are becoming more and more cognizant and aware of mental health and things like that, with all the studies coming out and all the awareness happening around it. And for me, the quality of life aspect is the most important thing. And I just knew it wasn't going to be there if I was going to be a doctor. And that's kind of something that I emphasized when I was talking to my parents about why I wanted to transition out of that.
Great, thank you. So just a few more, we're going to have a few more minutes. So if anybody listening wants to add in more questions to the Q&A, please do so now, and we will get to those. But I have another one that we had planned. What would you say is one thing students could be doing right now while they're in college to prepare for a career in like the entertainment industry related to business?
Entertainment industry, honestly, the best thing you could do is try and find summer internships where you can come out to LA. That's where most of the studios are based, and come live here for 3 months and intern, because I have seen more people get hired because they were an intern and they knew people that were at the executive level than anyone else. I mean, I've made referrals internally for people that I've worked with as mentees that I've met through networking events, and a couple of them have panned out, but I'd say more so people that have had an opportunity to intern themselves and showcase their work ethic. Those have always paid off so much more than anything else. I know it's hard for a lot of people to do that, but if there's a way that you can, that's probably the most important thing. If you can't do that, some other things that you can be doing on a daily basis that that shouldn't cost you any money or should be very cost effective would be, one, reading Variety, Deadline, and Hollywood Reporter every single day. That's what everybody reads. I read those websites daily, if not by a couple times a day, about entertainment news. And watching films and paying attention to production companies and studios and seeing if you can see patterns. Because one question that a lot of studios like to ask during interviews is, what's your favorite Lionsgate film? What's your top 3 Lionsgate movies? Or what's your top movies overall? And so the more film you watch, whether it's on Netflix or HBO or wherever, and kind of paying attention to who's releasing what, will definitely help you out in an interview later on.
All right, great. So it looks like we just have 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up here. You mentioned internships, which is great. I'm glad that you said that and I did not. Speaking of kind of things that students could be doing now, can you maybe talk about what resources you think students should be utilizing while they're still in college?
Yeah, career services for sure. And I know that, some of you might be rolling your eyes at me when I say that, but I really wish I took advantage of that a lot more in my undergrad. I waited until I was basically getting my MBA that I took real hard advantage of those types of opportunities. They helped with resume, interview practicing, everything that you would need to have success after you graduate. And then, seeing if there's classes that you can sit in on that you can audit, even I don't know how big the classes are for your guys' business school, but there were some classes that when I was getting my MBA, I went to our Dodge Film School and I would just sit in the back of the class and I would just see what the film students were talking about. And the bigger ones you can kind of sneak into and you go unnoticed, but the smaller ones I would get permission from the professor and let him know why I wanted to do it. But auditing classes where you don't have to worry about taking tests or exams or anything like that, especially when they're about subjects that you think you might be interested in, but you're unsure. I think it's a great way to kind of expand your ideas in your brain about where you want to go.
Okay, so what is your favorite film is the next question.
Oh, that's tough too. I get asked this a lot. It comes and goes in waves for me. I think Tarantino is my favorite director. Pulp Fiction is probably the movie I've seen the most. So I'd probably say Pulp Fiction, but I have a very soft spot in my heart for the John Wick franchise, all three of them. And then I'm also a really big fan of Tropic Thunder.